Fight Back Radio, production of fightbacknews.org, taking you to the heart of the people's struggle. I'm your host, Richard Berg, and today I'm here with Eliza Schultz, who's on the board of directors of the LGBTQ Caucus of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters. And so before we get started with the interview, though, I just wanted to, we're at a time where civil rights are under attack, not just LGBTQ rights, which we'll talk about today, and labor rights, which we'll talk about today, but civil rights of all kinds of Black, Brown, Asian people, women, and the Supreme Court is leading this attack. It's restrictions on abortion. It's going to come out, looks like very soon, taking back what's left of affirmative action, and it's more important than ever, or as important as ever, that all progressive people, whether you're a socialist, a communist, a revolutionary, a liberal, progressive, however you identify yourself, an anarchist, that we stand together and fight these attacks from the right wing. Like I said, led by the Supreme Court, but we see the Trump section of the Republican Party is just coming off the hinges on this kind of thing, and so. It's important that we stand together and fight back. Otherwise, we're going to lose the gains that we've made, and we've lost quite a few already. To be quite frank with people here. So with that little rant, I'm going to turn to my guest here, Eliza Schultz, who knows about these things. Eliza, you're as I mentioned, you're on the board of directors of the LGBTQ Caucus of the Teamsters. And you guys just had a conference, right? So why don't you tell me a little bit about the conference? What happened there? What were you trying to accomplish? Was it successful? And, a little bit maybe about the Teamsters' approach to the LGBTQ plus question.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really good to be on here, Richard. So we just held our third annual LGBTQ plus conference for the International Brotherhood of Teamsters in Redondo Beach, California. It was a really big success, the largest one that's been held so far, bringing together Teamsters from all across the country, all kinds of different industries and workplaces. And, what it's really about is taking a step forward to say that the Teamsters Union is going to organize our LGBTQ plus members and all those who want to fight for LGBTQ plus rights and really start to make a difference. So, we talked about what can be done in contracts and negotiations to protect LGBTQ plus rights. We talked about the political situation that you alluded to, what needs to be done to fight, within society to protect, the rights that we have won, which are already being targeted and taken away. So I think, it was a lot of success. I think everybody, learned, something by coming together. And we have really big plans moving forward for the caucus. We're expanding all across the country. We have new chapters that are forming. It's really the right time to get involved and to start fighting, for LGBTQ plus rights within the Teamsters. So it's a very exciting time.
Yeah, no, it sounds like it. So what did you come up with? You said you talked about how to do this. What were kinds of the things that people threw forward about tactics and approaches to trying to bring people outside the LGBTQ plus community, or even to unite people within it to fight to protect the rights that you have?
Yeah, so I think that first that there's a growing recognition among union leaders, and especially within the Teamsters, that LGBTQ plus people are in just about every workplace that we have. They're part of the membership, they're part of the union, and they have issues that have not been addressed, and that part of the goal and mission of the union movement to fight for the rights of all workers includes making those protections in place for the LGBTQ plus movement. I think one thing that's been really big is getting the Teamsters involved in the community, coming out to the Pride marches, getting involved in community events, and finding that there is, natural solidarity between the LGBTQ plus movement and the workers' movement, and that this is, an alliance that can be built and strengthened, to service the things that, everybody is fighting for. So I think that, that's what we're seeing right now. And I think we're only going to see, these developments continue. So,
I mean, is this difficult to do? I mean, is organized labor's roots are, maybe in factories initially, and in your union, truck drivers, and so there's this macho culture, working class culture that's out there, and radiates throughout union leaders. At least it has historically, from my observations. Do you have a hard time getting them to say, okay, look, you need to you need to set some of that aside and be more inclusive?
Mm-hmm. So I think that there has been definitely a struggle in the history of the union movement, against bigotry and indiscrimination, even from, within our own ranks. But I will say that, my experience in the Teamsters has been very good. And I think that there is something inherent about organizing and being part of a union, which broadens people's perspectives and helps them understand the importance of coming together. I think that part of being in a union is that you're in a workplace with people who come from all kinds of different walks of life, different experiences, and you don't always necessarily understand, every single one of your coworkers and where they've been, but you know that if you're going to fight for your own rights and fight to improve your conditions on the job, that you have to come together and work in solidarity. And what we've seen is that on all kinds of issues, let's take the struggle against racism, and for equality and freedom for Black people in this country, that white workers who are part of unions see their racist attitudes actually decline, and their support for things like affirmative action and other demands that would improve conditions for Black people increase. It's due to the experience of being in a union and of having solidarity. I think the exact same thing is true for LGBTQ plus people in the struggle, that when you have an environment like a union which enshrines equality and dignity, as your basic organizing principle, that there is more space for LGBTQ people to come out and say, these are the issues that we're facing, and get support. So that's what I've seen, is that, when I talk to, Teamster leaders, and I talk to my coworkers, that I actually get a lot of support, and I think that the conditions are very good right now in the labor movement.
No, that's interesting. So the solidarity is the strength of organized labor. That's where its power comes from, and so I mean that's so unity, bringing people together, is critical. Do you see difficulties sometimes, maybe to turn the question around, with getting people from the LGBTQ plus caucus or from that community to support other section, women's Teamsters or African Americans or things like that, or and is that part of your plans going forward?
Yeah, so I think that there can always be an approach where people want to focus on the issues or causes that they think are most immediate to them. But I think that there is something kind of inherent in the experience of being LGBTQ plus that makes support for labor and working together labor unions most natural. The fact is that LGBTQ plus people face some of the worst conditions in the workplace, in terms of being fired, discrimination. These are usually people who really do need a union, real protections, at the workplace. And so I think a lot of LGBTQ people most naturally understand, what the labor movement, is trying to do and why it's important. I think that you see the economic situation of LGBTQ people as a whole is lower than the general population, due to, all kinds of issues. I think there's a, lack of support, from, families and, other institutions that would normally, be able to, help people out, going through life. but then, these, what I told you about, people getting fired, getting, declined job interviews, all this stuff is still happening, at very high rates. So I think that there is, there's always a great response when the Teamsters goes to the Pride Parade. They experience a lot of support. It's a natural home.
No, it makes sense, because I didn't realize that, but if there's a lower wage for LGBTQ people because of desperation or whatever reason, it puts downward pressure on everybody's wages. So it's like you need to have unity to move everybody up to get a better standard of living. So let me ask you then about. I know you work for the United Parcel Service, delivering packages, and your contract's up in about a year, or maybe a little less now. Do you are there demands from this caucus to try to get into that contract, or even to other Teamster contracts? What kinds of language could a collective bargaining agreement with an employer do to help improve the rights of LGBTQ plus people?
Mm-hmm. So I think that, first off, for most LGBTQ plus people, their basic issues are going to be the same as any of their coworkers. Making sure that the systems that are in place are fair and equal, for all workers, that, there are protections against, harassment, by supervisors. This is harassment by management is a huge issue for pretty much everybody across UPS. But if you are in a category or belong to a group that faces particular oppression and mistreatment, then you can, your experience of that is double. So making those kind of improvements, are going to make a difference. But we're also looking, and we're still working this out, but there are things that could be done to particularly highlight, the issues that LGBTQ plus people face. So there's anti-discrimination language in every contract, and we could do things like include the categories to include gender identity and gender expression, to make sure that we have explicit language so that trans people, at the workplace, have something that they can rely on, when they're facing discrimination or harassment. You could also look at things like making sure you have equal access to, bathroom facilities or things of that nature. Some states, some local areas have those protections, but a lot, UPS is in every state in this country, some with, really transphobic laws that, can be difficult to deal with. So making explicit protections, around the use of facilities, can make a difference there. Providing gender neutral facilities, so that trans people have a place where they're safe, non-binary people have a place where they can go. I think that there's also healthcare. We're looking at healthcare plans. Do they include equal access to healthcare for LGBTQ plus people? There's not discrimination, which some healthcare plans have. And then also, what kind of services are covered? Is there the LGBTQ plus services that are needed by a lot of members, in these healthcare plans? And a lot of times there's never been an assessment to even look through these plans and even ask these questions, but that's being asked now. It's a topic that's coming up and Teamsters are looking at.
No, that's good. I mean, it's like, so there's a way to actually organize your coworkers, put something in a contract that forces an employer to do the right thing. Why would the employer not do the right thing? I mean, we have amongst there's LGBTQ people. They're not all working class people. Some of them are they're every class, including the richest people, including the people that run UPS, no doubt. And so why would somebody, why would a boss not say, look, let's treat everybody right here?
Yeah. So I think that there is definitely pressure within corporate America now to put on a superficial, support for LGBTQ plus rights. So, UPS, they might roll out the pride flag, or whatever,
yes,
in the workplace. But, at the same time, you have supervisors who are, using homophobic slurs, to my coworkers. They're, mistreating them because of their expression, or, identity. And, there's not an incentive for the company to take those issues seriously.
How do you deal with that when that comes up at work?
Yeah. So I think that one of the benefits, of being a Teamster at UPS is that we do have a contract. We do have, some basic principles that, protect you from harassment, that are supposed to enshrine dignity and respect. So, when these issues arise, you have a grievance procedure, you have the solidarity of the union, that you have a place where you can go and try to fight back and get these issues addressed. And that's why having a union is just so important for LGBTQ plus workers. Without a union, it can be very, very difficult to assert and defend your rights.
No, that's good. So you have your union contract that you negotiate with the boss that gives you rights, but then you have beyond that even the solidarity of your sister, brother, sibling, Teamsters. Mm-hmm. Yes, no, that's good. But let me ask you this: what about if there's another Teamster that you work with who's out of line or is harassing his coworker or their coworkers? How do you deal with that kind of situation?
Yeah, so it can definitely be difficult, and that kind of harassment and bullying is real in the workplace. I think that one of the strengths of union is that it enshrines that a principle of equality, respect, and dignity, and so it's really up to the union activists and active union members on the shop floor to come together to say that we support our coworkers, they deserve dignity and respect, and to challenge and fight back against any kind of bullying and bigotry. I think that a lot of people in a really male-dominated environment, like UPS, where there can be like macho attitudes and a lot of issues of masculinity. I think some people don't know how to. They don't understand, or they don't know how to deal, with the existence of LGBTQ plus people, and they might feel threatened by it. And I think that it's about standing strong, showing solidarity, not allowing stuff like that to slide. Yeah. That a union provides the kind of environment to have at work.
No, that makes sense. I want to go back to how I opened up the show about some of the civil rights issues that are out there right now, and trying to deal with some of these things. And besides the Supreme Court, you got like Governor DeSantis in Florida, who's the Don't Say Gay, and different whatever Trump people are popping up and running for office now. We're filming this just before the elections, the midterm elections. But it's so there's should our strategy be to be electoral to get rid of those guys, or you mentioned about a shop floor strategy, but beyond that, how do we deal with the environment that exists throughout our country or maybe throughout our world? What kinds of tactics should we be using to try to? The Supreme Court's not even whatever, it's appointed by the president. We're probably stuck with these idiots that we got now for quite a while. What do you see as a strategy to try to change attitudes and protect rights that we already have as well?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that there is a basic majority in our society in the United States that actually do support LGBTQ plus rights and want to see like freedom, respect and dignity exist. I think that our main task right now is really about organizing, to put together, where these attacks are happening, organizing groups, in the community and across society that can, start to, fight back, to protest and, to get involved in every arena, whether it's electoral, or in the workplace. I think for us in the Teamsters, and in the labor movement as a whole, we have a recognition that one of the most powerful institutions that working people have access to, are the unions. When unions get involved in these political struggles, around civil rights, around democracy in our society, they can really make a difference because, unions, the labor movement represents the vast majority of our society, and the principles of freedom for people as a whole. And so so unions, so we're looking at how can unions weigh in on these struggles, help build them up, and fighting in the streets and electorally, whatever it takes to push back, because the attacks are fierce and they're very dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
We were seeing rights getting stripped away. Thinking of DeSantis, I think one of the most terrifying things that I saw was that he pointed to the existence of a cross-dressing law that still exists in the Florida statutes, which he openly talked about if they could use that to ban drag performances in the state. And I think that when you look at what the right wing is doing, this is not just an attack on trans people, but these are challenges against the kind of basic freedom and democratic rights that we as a whole have within our society to be who you want to be, to wear what you want to wear. These are very kind of fundamental parts of being a free human being, and that's these are the kind of things that the right wing are attacking. So
no, it's interesting. So let me ask you about we had Joe Burns on our show recently on Fight Back Radio, and he wrote a book called Class Struggle Unionism that talks about that there basically it goes back to the IWW, even that the workers and the capitalists have nothing in common, and basically pushes for this view that the supporting working class struggles and having them fight for everybody's liberation. And but there's LGBTQ, and for that matter Black and Latino and other oppressed peoples across all classes, and so you talked about unions and they're the organization of the working class. How does this all square in your mind? Should we be fighting for class struggle unionism, or how should this look in terms of liberating people?
Yeah, so I think that there's a couple different elements. I think first off, within the LGBTQ plus movement, where we're fighting over particular demands, rights, laws that we want to change, those require broad coalitions. And the movements are broad movements that are to incorporate multiple classes. And I think that's part of the movement, and that is necessary to win some of these fights. But I think that coming from the working class perspective, you have a recognition that the majority of people within society, but absolutely the vast majority of people who are LGBTQ are working class. Actually, they face oftentimes very dire economic situations, and the issues of LGBTQ plus people are often the issues that they face because they're workers. The issues they face in the workplace, trying to get housing, healthcare. These are some of the most important issues for LGBTQ plus people as a whole. And so I think that when we are, building this movement and we're trying to build real unity and carry it forward towards, the idea of liberation for LGBTQ plus people, that it requires actually having the working class organized and taking the leading role, because from our perspective, only the working class is actually capable of bringing these struggles all the way to their end goals of liberation. But we're not going to turn away from forming coalitions where it makes sense. We're trying to win.
No, that makes sense. That's a good answer. I'm going to turn to a little bit of history here. It's I think back to when I was young in the early '70s. The movement for LGBTQ rights looked a lot different, and a lot of people trace the modern movement back to the riots that happened at Stonewall. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about those times, and what happened. What is Stonewall? What happened there? Why did it happen? And what's its significance?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think, with the recognition that there have always been LGBTQ plus people and there's always been resistance, it is true that the modern movement that, we kind of understand really did emerge in that period of time. And while there's, precursors, over in San Francisco, before Stonewall, that was the moment where resistance to oppression, really came forward. So, for LGBTQ plus people who face ostracization in society, there's always been a desire for community. And so you see gay clubs, you have cross-dressing associations, which go back for, hundreds of years, really. But, these kind of like spaces are, important, but they're mostly covert, hidden away, from society to provide a place, where people can go and be. What happened with Stonewall is Stonewall was a bar that was part of the underground. The fact is that legally operating institutions did not serve the LGBTQ plus population, the gay community at this time, and so this provided a pretext for police raids, and police raids were actually very common, almost routine with Stonewall, almost a kind of a price of doing business that was accepted on both sides. What was unique is that in this particular raid that happened in 1969 is that it was unexpected, and it was particularly brutal, and it aroused the anger. It was a spark, because people, the people who were there, facing, the police repression, some of them, thought this was the moment where it was time to fight back, that all of the oppression and ostracization and harassment, had gone too far. And it makes sense that it happened in this moment. At the late 60s, people had experienced the years of the Black freedom movement and everything that had been fought and achieved in the struggle against segregation. You had seen the huge movement against the war in Vietnam, which had really rocked society. And so there was a growing attitude that resistance, was right, and that, fighting back, was necessary. And that's what happened there in Stonewall in New York City. And from that moment, that spirit of fighting back, that spirit of resistance spread, because that feeling of oppression was universal, in the community. And so, it brought, a experience which mostly, the community, which mostly survived by trying to hide away and maintain covert spaces, came out, into the public and decided to try to fight, for change. And that's where you have the Gay Liberation Front, and then, the whole modern history, of the LGBTQ plus movement that flowed from then.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because you see, things move from there. It took, I suppose it takes a lot of courage to come out and be public about your sexuality anytime, but especially in those days, I think where the repression was severe. Looking forward though, I the next big jump I see, feel free to correct me, is the the movement during the AIDS pandemic, and and when just enormous courage was shown by people fighting a life and death situation. Could you talk a little bit about the AIDS crisis and how that affected the LGBTQ movement?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that what we saw with the AIDS crisis was an epidemic that was allowed to ravage our community. And what people saw is that not only were they going to get no help at all from the government, but that the government had actively turned their backs on them and was absolutely happy to watch the LGBTQ plus community die. And so that absolutely organized there was a real spirit of resistance. You had the emergence of ACT UP, which ACT UP has had a huge impact on having that spirit, maintaining that spirit of resistance.
So yeah, I remember ACT UP showed enormous courage during that time. It was, and I think this whole gay AIDS fight at that time was a game changer. I think nothing was the same after that.
Yeah, I think that there was an understanding that if we were going to carve a place for LGBTQ plus people in society and protect people's lives, that you had to go out there, you had to defy the law, you had to, resist, with everything, you had. And I think that's a spirit which, has continued to inspire LGBTQ plus people today. That, we understand that we can't take the rights and the freedoms that we have for granted. That everything that we have, our ability to walk out in the street and to exist, in society, is something that, people had to fight for, and that it cost them.
Yeah, I mean, I remember the early days of the gay pride parades. They were, they were small. They took courage to march in them. And, I know you said it's important for Teamsters and other labor people to march in these parades today, that they find allies there. Could you talk a little bit about that? About the gay pride parades and why they're significant and why, how they've come, where they've come from and where they are now?
Yeah. So I think that absolutely what you said is correct, that, coming out and, being public, in society, can be, very dangerous, but it's something that we have to do, because we understand that there are so many members of the community that have no place to be, and, and it's only by, carving out that public space that we're ever going to experience freedom. So what we're doing today is we're organizing Teamsters to take part and to participate, in these parades, to say that the union movement, stands in solidarity, and is going to fight for the rights of LGBTQ plus people, because there's an understanding that the struggle of LGBTQ plus people is a struggle for, democratic rights, that it's a struggle for, freedom within society, and that's an important struggle for labor unions to take up. It's a cause that impacts the lives of working class people and of the many LGBTQ plus members, within the unions.
Yeah, and it's solidarity. I mean, it's like we all need each other. That's, again, going back to the whole thing, where our power comes from. I mean, Teamsters for them to have a successful contract battle at UPS, they need the support of everybody, including the LGBTQ community. And the LGBTQ community needs the support of everybody to protect and advance its rights, including Teamsters of all kinds. And so, putting this together, becomes critically important, I think. So, but let me pivot again here. So, you're a Teamster. It's a hard job. I mean, you're delivering packages every day. I know you guys have a contract coming up. You just elected new officers. The national officers, I think you supported the change in national office when Sean O'Brien was just elected the national president. Why did you support Sean O'Brien, and what does that really mean for organized labor in this country?
Yeah, so I think that the Teamsters United movement was a really important one within the labor movement as a whole, but it was one that was really needed within the Teamsters. I think that from my experience at UPS in 2018, when we had our contract negotiations at UPS, I found the approach of the Teamsters leadership to just be completely unacceptable. The fact is that
the previous administration.
The previous administration. The fact is that the workers at UPS in 2018 were getting themselves organized and ready to fight. I was a part-timer at UPS, and I was really excited to get involved in the contract campaign and in the movement that was happening. And what I saw was I was extremely disappointed in the way that the Hoffa administration handled the entire negotiations, from the brownout of information, where we basically were not told anything that was going on, and the things that we did here were horrible, like the agreement to create the second tier of drivers, the 22-4 position, where drivers would get paid less for doing the same work with less rights. It was extremely worrying. So that's when I really got active, as a Teamster, for the first time, and started to organize. I think what we saw is that we had to come together in 2018 to vote against a contract that was going to degrade our basic working conditions. And the fact that the previous administration pushed through that contract, despite the majority of us voting no, was unacceptable. And that's really where, a lot of us started to look towards, Sean O'Brien and Teamsters United movement, which had been, ongoing, but had massively grown due to Sean O'Brien joining, the movement. And, they stood up and opposed the move to approve the UPS contract, said that, we need to continue to fight for something better. And, I think that from that point, onward, it was clear that we needed to, elect new leadership for the union. So
he won. So they won big. They swept the slate across all sections of the United States, Canada. The Teamsters United are now, running the national union. You work at United Parcel Service. Their contract's coming up. This is their chance. What do we want this time? So you felt like you got sold out last time.
Yeah.
By the Hoffa people. Now you got your guys in there, hopefully. What do we want for UPS workers?
Yeah, so there's there's a lot of different demands, but I think it comes down to a few basic things. Number one, we have to get rid of the 22-4 position. These drivers who are paid less and have less rights, the position that I myself am in right now, it shouldn't exist, and it's a major.
So it's like a two-tier system. So it is. So some people make more money than others doing exactly the same work.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And have more protections around overtime and things of that nature. So it's
messed up.
Yeah, it's unacceptable. I think another major issue is the condition of the part-timers. The part-timers have had an extremely low wage for far too long. It is, it has been completely ridiculous, and the company has actually had to step in and implement their own wage increases all across the country in order to even hire enough workers to staff the operations. But the problem is that with the company in charge of these raises, they give them they do the most ridiculous things. They give one wage increase to one shift and not another, one building, one geographic area, and then they take away these increases whenever they want, or they switch them out to bonus systems where people are paid based on their attendance, and this is the situation that
is that it seems like that's designed to divide the workforce, and I got mine, screw you. Has that been the effect, or has it united people to say screw them?
Yeah, so it's definitely there has been people have been getting organized. So in 705, it absolutely in our local, it absolutely brought people together to say that this is unacceptable, that everybody should be given equal pay raises, and that in this contract coming forward, we need to make a major change. So that's what we're going to be fighting for, is that these MRAs can't be, these market rate adjustments, they can't be, introduced and then taken away, and, not given equally, to everybody. But, part of this is going to be just increasing the base rate of the part-timers so that it's already at a living wage. So that's one of the big things that's being talked about. More access to full-time jobs. The fact is that unless you are going to go out and drive, there are very few full-time jobs within the warehouse. So an important demand has always been to increase more access to full-time jobs for UPS workers inside. And so that's something we're looking at. There's also the issue of the Uberization of UPS with personal vehicle drivers who are expected to use their own personal cars to deliver.
Use their own car to deliver packages. Mm-hmm.
So this
sounds like you're a pizza delivery guy, which is bad. The pizza delivery guys didn't need somebody to give them a car. I'm sorry to interrupt. Boy, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely ridiculous, but it's the UPS is looking for any way they can cut corners and try to make money, offload the cost of maintaining vehicles onto
no doubt.
Onto the employees, pay them less money to deliver anything. So they shouldn't exist. There's a lot of opposition to it, and it's something we're looking at. And then as well the issue of no air conditioning and just the kind of heat exhaustion, heat stroke, all kinds of issues that a lot of package car drivers are experiencing, trying to deliver out in just extreme heat conditions, which are only getting worse as we experience more extreme weather events.
No, I can see that. Wow. Well, thank you so much for joining us here. It's been a real pleasure to talk about the Teamsters and to talk about the LGBTQ plus caucus that you're involved in and are leading, and hopefully people will join these caucuses and will start to fight for people's democratic rights. This is something that we need across the country. We need people to start to unite. The attacks from the right wing are real, folks, and I think the Fight Back Radio listeners know that. if you're not active, find somebody in your community that finds something of your interest, and we want you to get involved. For those of you who want to reach Fight Back Radio, you can reach us at richard.fightbackradio@gmail.com. Also, we'll put in the show notes how you can get a hold of us in other different ways. This is we're going again. We have video for those of you that are watching on YouTube. There are other ones that have video platforms, and so I want to give we're having some, we're learning how to do this, and we'll get better as we go. But I especially want to thank our production team, who's worked very hard to make this happen. And so, Shane Tremley, Vince Olson, and Dodd McLogan, thank you so much for your efforts on this. And so for our entire Fight Back Radio team, I'm Richard Berg saying until next time, all power to the people.